Hey, everybody. My name is Jared, and I am a Master Mason in the state of Mississippi in the United States of America. And this is the bicentennial tie. Here in the state of Mississippi, we just celebrated 200 years of Freemasonry in the state of Mississippi. And our Grand Master had a celebratory tie done up to mark the occasion, and he had it done by Edgar Alejandro over at Masonic Revival. So make sure you check him out. Appreciate all his help in getting us a whole bunch of pins, coins, ties, and other things that went along with our bicentennial. So, here we are. This is only my second live broadcast on this channel, and I know it takes time for people to get notified and get logged in into the chat room. So we'll go into this a little bit slow. If you saw the original title for tonight's episode, it was How to Begin Research with Joseph Wages, who you might remember um, is the author of The Secret School of Wisdom that I have sitting behind me here. Joseph is not just a good author, he's an outstanding researcher. And he and I spoke earlier this week about him coming on the show. We spoke many times along before that as well about him coming on the show. And he's got some great ideas to share with everybody about how to get started in research. I mean, you're looking at a Texas Mason with a 9-to-5 job, and he managed to do a book about the Illuminati and reveal things that nobody ever knew before about how the Illuminati actually works. So if there's somebody we can lean on to find out how to start that kind of research, I felt like he was the guy. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get up with him this evening, and dare I say, I fear some serious accident may have befallen him. Joseph, if you're out there, I hope you and your family are well and everything is okay, and maybe this is just a technical glitch. So, anyway, here we are. Let me say good day to bodybuilding occultist who is with us first. Bram, I'm just going to go with the parts of your names that I can pronounce. I'm terrible at pronouncing names. I got Bram here and Josh, Jason Jeffcoat, the one and only, I presume, the senior grand warden for the state of Mississippi. David's with us, Nick, and BP. So, folks, good to see you. I thought that since Joseph wasn't able to join us tonight, hopefully he'll join us next week, but him and I'll have to work out the scheduling on that. I thought I might just bring you up to speed on how things are, and then we would open the floor up to some Q&A. And, you know, the way the internet works, we can't just bring in a video chat roundtable of everybody that's connected. It would just really bog things down. So I'm going to have to do the juggling of reading the chat and responding to you on video the whole time. So forgive me as we juggle through this. I only intended to be on tonight for about a half an hour. So that's only the time that I've set aside for doing this. So that's our time limit tonight. But brethren, let's talk as much as we can and see where things go. One thing I want to share with you, some project that really has nothing to do with the channel and something anybody that's not a Freemason that's local to me would even know about, is a project that my Knights of St. Andrew chapter has started up. So several months ago, I was voted in to be the Venerable Master of my Knights of St. Andrew, which, if you're not familiar with, is sort of a subsidiary, if you like, of the Scottish Rite. Very convoluted how it got started and what recognition it does and doesn't have and all those kind of good things. But Knights of St. Andrew, technically the 29th degree in the current Scottish Rite system in the southern jurisdiction. But more often than not, you're not going to find too many valleys that actually perform that degree. And the Knights of St. Andrew very focused about service, and especially service to the valley they are a part of, but also, of course, to the community in general. So one thing, and I kind of bring this up because it kind of sort of ties back to Joseph Wages. I was talking to Joseph about how he goes about digitally scanning books. And he told me about some of his exploits of his travels and his research, things that he's done with Arturo de Hoyos, the Grand Archivist and historian for the Supreme Council of the Southern Jurisdiction. And he recommended a particular piece of hardware to me, and I was able to find one for a reasonable price on eBay, and I bought it. And it's a really great device. Really, it kind of looks like a desk lamp when you just look at it. But you set a book under it, it scans, you flip the page, it automatically detects that something changed, it scans again, and you just keep flipping pages until the sucker's done. If it was typed, something that you were scanning is typed, it will even automatically scan that, put it through the recognition program, and make it so that it's even like a searchable PDF. So really great stuff. Really great way that you can scan an old book and easily search its contents for something. And that's kind of my end goal in our very first project. So my Knights of St. Andrew chapter took this, and I went to him and I said, hey, look, what if we use this as a bit of a service project? Let's start with digitizing the minute books from our Scottish Rite Valley. And then when we are done with that and more people than myself are trained up on how to use the software, we can turn around to some lodges and say, hey, how would you like, for archival purposes only? That's very important here in the state of Mississippi. We're not trying to digitize your minutes all the way. You still have to keep your bound minute books. But what if we made a copy digitally for you to archive away, just in case something happened to those printed materials? So that's kind of the end goal, and then we'll use that as a fundraiser for the KSA and be able to do more education programs and other things in the future. So that's a project we just got started on. Just last week, we scanned our very first minute book, and right now I have a couple brethren going through and doing the detailed work of making sure all the scans are aligned properly and that kind of stuff. So it takes a tremendous amount of effort to do it right. It's pretty quick scanning a book, all things considered, but the making it look good is the hard part. So we're down into that now, but I'm really excited to see that we're kind of engaged in this service project at this point. We're not just talking about it anymore; we're actually doing it, and hopefully we'll see things really progress here over the next couple months. Part of the reason why this is such a big deal to me is I only recently learned that my Scottish Rite Valley, the Valley of Meridian in the Orient of Mississippi, was the very first valley in this Orient. And that's just historically significant. You would makes you start to think, okay, well, this was the very first Scottish Rite body in the state of Mississippi. What can we learn about that? Who were these people? How did things go? And then secondary to that is the cathedral, the Scottish Rite Cathedral that was originally built, has since burned down. And I'm looking for some more information, and that's about as far as I'm willing to reveal at this point. But I'm looking for some further information, and I'm hoping that these minute books are going to reveal that to me. And since they actually typed their minutes and then bound them into a book, it's going to be searchable. So I'm tickled to death. We're not just looking at cursive handwriting from 100 years ago that you can hardly read yourself, let alone expect a computer to. So the fact that it's typed means we're going to actually have searchable minutes from 100 years ago, and that's pretty exciting to me. So I guess kind of the part I was getting to there, somewhere around the early 1900s. I don't have the exact date yet on when somebody first stepped into Mississippi as the very first Scottish Rite Freemason in Mississippi. Of course, I know when all the charters were and things like that, but the history I'm being told verbally is that there was some meetings, that there were meetings before the cathedral was built, which just stands to reason. But the minute books I have don't start until after the building was occupied. And so there's already a missing gap of probably 5 to 10 years that I have no records of. Now, whether or not those records are sitting undiscovered someplace, I don't know. The only thing I know for sure is they are not in the safe of the Scottish Rite Valley where I am a member of. So when I see something like that, it instantly makes me think, okay, well, if we lost some already, we darn well better preserve what we've already got before we lose that too. So I'm excited to be a part of making sure that the Meridian Scottish Rite Valley doesn't lose anything else. All right, so let me take a quick look over here at the chat and see how things are doing. Good to see everybody here. Too many names for me to try to get through. Let's see here. I see a question mark. Um, Mason Espinoza says, I don't know any Masons. I work in masonry, but would like to join the Brotherhood. How do I go about it? So, Mason, I presume you mean that you're actually a stonemason or that you lay bricks or something to that effect in your profession. I've got a couple different videos that really speak to this, and here's what it boils down to. You may or may not live in an area where there is a Masonic lodge. I don't know, but there are ways to look that up. There are printed publications by a company called Pentagraph called The List of Lodges Masonic. You can look that up on the internet and buy one. They're about $40 a piece, so that's a fairly expensive investment, but it does have a list of all the lodges by which a jurisdiction has chartered them. So, what I'm trying to get to here is you may live in a country and you try to flip to it in the book and there's no lodges listed. But the problem is it may be listed by a foreign Grand Lodge. One case in point where you can see that is last year I visited the country of Jamaica, and I was trying to find about lodges in Jamaica. Well, you don't just flip in this book to Jamaica and find a list of lodges, because the lodges in Jamaica have been chartered by the Grand Lodge of Scotland. So you have to go through Scotland's listing to then look under their foreign Grand Lodges and then find the ones that are in whatever country they may have chartered a lodge in. So that can be a complicated way of doing it, but it seems to be a very reliable resource. You could try just searching the internet. However, a lot of Grand Lodges, especially overseas, don't have websites. Or if you find a website, you may only find contact information for the Grand Lodge. Have to contact somebody there, let them know what city you live in, and they'll probably take your contact information, pass that along to the local lodge, and then rely on the lodge to contact you. Last and not least is go to the lodge and talk to somebody. Generally, Masons meet once a month, sometimes less, sometimes much more frequently. So it may take some diligence on your part to find out when that lodge meets. If you can figure out if they have a mailing address, you can write a letter and express your interest and leave your contact information. So whenever they do go to the lodge and they check the mail, they can read it and call you or write you back. So there's a ways around it, but you have to make the effort. And I think this is probably one of the more challenging consequences of having a Masonic YouTube channel is I constantly get contact from people, messages from people asking me about how to join the lodge and how they don't have any Masons that they know of in their area or any lodges in their area. And people seem to have this feeling that just because I'm a Freemason, I somehow have a master membership directory of every member in the entire world and their personal contact information, and we exchange Christmas presents. And that's just not the case. I barely know most of the Masons that live around me. In fact, I guarantee you I don't know most of the Masons that lived around me because most of them don't come to lodge. So the whole point of this message is just to say, folks, you cannot rely on somebody on the internet, whether he thinks he knows enough to make a video or not. He doesn't know every Mason in the United States or in the entire world. So please, you have to take the initiative on yourself. That's the only way you can go about it. Mason Espinoza, you've got to find somebody. Here in the United States, our practice is that we cannot ask you to join. There are some jurisdictions that permit that or have different variances on it, but uh, for the grand majority of them all, we cannot walk up to you and say, "Hey, you seem like a pretty good guy. Have you ever thought about being a Freemason?" We're just not allowed to, because it has to be your interest. You have to express that interest. We can't impose that interest upon you. So reach out to somebody. Don't be afraid to say, "Hey, what do y'all think about those Freemasons? Y'all know where they meet? I'd like to talk to one and see where it goes." But I would start with trying to see if there's any contact information online and take it from there. Terry Norris asks a question here. He says, "When I was 18, I was convicted of a felony. Since that time, I've been lived a law-abiding life. Honestly, what is the likelihood that I could become a Freemason?" And Bram correctly answers and says it depends on your jurisdiction. So the only thing I can speak to is here in Mississippi. My understanding is that in Mississippi, that if you have ever been convicted of a felony, you are unable to petition a lodge, or rather to say, the lodge is unable to accept you. Now, in other jurisdictions, I've heard things where there's time limits, just strict time limits that are set in the rules, so I don't know what they are. I'm throwing this out there just for an example. Maybe your felony was 10 years ago, and they say, hey, if it was more than 10 years ago, we're not worried about that. Obviously, you fix your life if you haven't run into the law in the last 10 years. Other jurisdictions flat out leave it up to the individual lodge, where the lodge can say, hey, look, this guy had a felony put on his record, 2 years ago, but really, this isn't something we think impacts his morality or his being. It was just a bad situation. Something happened and whatever. And so the lodge can turn around and say, we still are going to accept him, even though he had that felony. So Bram is correct. Terry, the only thing you can do is reach out possibly to the Grand Lodge of Tennessee. If you want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, just contact the Grand Secretary and ask. Or if you happen to know a Freemason, you can ask them. But I would be cautious. Not every Freemason is up to speed about all of their bylaws or how things really work. So before you take the first answer you get as gospel, look into it a little bit more, especially if that person tells you there's no way for you to join. Check again and just be sure so that you don't give up quicker than you need to. BP says, do you have any information about the role Freemasonry played at the creation of the United States? BP, I've got less than 15 minutes left, and that's just not enough time to cover Freemasonry in the United States and the formation of the United States. I know a little bit. I know enough that it's satiated my curiosity, but I certainly couldn't give you a historical discourse on the matter. Suffice to say, I would summarize it by saying it was significant. Let's see here. Terry says he's going to reach out to somebody. Let me see here. Josh asks me if I've ever been approached by a clandestine Mason. Not in the purpose of them wanting to converse on the secrets of Freemasonry with me, but I have had people message me who have been members of what they would term be a Grand Lodge that my Grand Lodge would not recognize. Usually, this is a situation where somebody has incorporated, whether it's a LLC or a corporation or whatever, they have a business that they have listed through the state. And they feel that because the state, the secretary of whatever that state is, has issued them a quote unquote charter by being licensed as a business, that they are somehow thereby granted the rights to be able to confer Masonic degrees and so forth. And so they gain members. And then eventually, at some point, one of those members contacts me and says that they're a member of this Grand Lodge. And of course, whoever set up that Grand Lodge has taught them all sorts of things on how to, that makes them feel like they're a legitimate Grand Lodge, and they're just not. And so I've always had very cordial conversation with those folks. They've never gone too far and tried to, get me to reveal anything, and I don't do the same to them. So we've spoken, but that's a matter of that. I've certainly never had anybody ask me to come to a lodge of theirs or anything along those lines. So folks, here we are, and the biggest series on this channel is the Q&A, the Ask a Freemason. So we got just a little bit more time left before I have to cut this off and make sure the kids get to bed and things like that. So if you've got any questions, now would be the time to get them in so that we can sort of fit them in before the bell rings here. If you've already asked a question and I haven't responded to it, please post it again. I just somehow missed it in the length of all the questions and chatter happening here in the video. So let me see here. What can we talk about? Or heck, yeah, give me a topic to talk about and we'll just go with that because I am completely unprepared for this. Well, speaking about being unprepared, I'm going to pick on my brother here since Jason Jeffcoat's tuning in. Uh, let me all give you a story to tell you why it matters that you ought to be prepared. So when I first joined Freemasonry, of course, all I was really worried about at the time, other than trying to understand some of the symbolism a little bit deeper than what was being taught to me just by learning my proficiency, was to learn that proficiency. That's where all my focus was. So once I was raised as a master mason, and I started to learn the other chairs around a lodge room. And in doing that, my mindset was whenever I go to a lodge, if somebody says, "Hey, Jared, can you?" I want my answer to be yes. Yes, I can. I'll be happy to help with that if that's what you would like me to do. Whether I came to sit on the sidelines or whether I came because the lodge said they needed help and asked for brethren to show up from other lodges, whatever the case was, I wanted to be able to say yes. Now that said, there are still some things in Mississippi ritual that my answer would have to be no. I haven't obtained that goal yet. Um, but there are many things that I have done time and time again. I have sat in the East as worshipful master and conferred every single degree. I've been the senior deacon, which here in the state of Mississippi is the more active role, if you will, with the candidate. And I've done that in every single degree and just about every other chair. In fact, the only things I'm really lacking are a couple lectures. And I thought I had it, folks. I thought I had it. I mean, I've done them all several times, and I went to a an event here called Masonic Day, and it's just like one of those events you've been to a million times, where you go to a lodge and you spend all day going through all three degrees, and the purpose of it is to provide instruction, to give some kind of polish the edges, so to speak. Not necessarily to learn it from scratch, but polish the edges. Well, I went to that event and I really expected I was going to sit on the sidelines all day. And so I never once thought about ritual, never once. And then all of a sudden, my good friend, Jason Jeffcoat, our senior Grand Warden, says, "Jared, come over here, sit in the East." and I'm thinking, okay, sure, no problem. I got it. So I go over and I sit in the East. And now I don't know about you folks, but here in Mississippi, whenever we have one of these kind of events, 99.99%. And until yesterday, I would have said 100% of the time, you sit down, you do the entered apprentice, then you do the fellowcraft, then you usually have a lunch or something, and then you do the master mason's degree, and then everybody goes home. Well, apparently we wanted to kind of spice life up a little bit, and we started in the master's degree. And I haven't done that for a couple years, and it sure as shoot wasn't on my mind, and I was not prepared. So I say this because Jason's a good friend of mine, and he knows I could care less that he called me up there. Heck, I said yes. So all I bring this up to mention is it's important to be prepared. And I think this really ties back to the lessons we have in Masonry, does it not? Because we talk about being there for our brethren. And of course, I have to sort of skirt around this, but we talk about how, well, I've said this in videos before, how we tell new members in my lodge that Freemasonry is not just friends. Freemasonry is when you call me at 2 o'clock in the morning and I see your name on the caller ID, I don't pick it up and say, "Hey, man, are you okay?" If you're calling me at that time in the morning, I know something's wrong. So I'm going to answer the phone and say, "Where are you at? What do you need?" And I'm coming, plain and simple. Something's wrong. I'm coming. Um, so we're always in a way prepared to help our brethren. Um, and I think that by being prepared to be able to assist in something inside of the lodge room and the ritual aspect is one way that we sort of let our brethren know, hey, I'm serious about this. I'm ready to help you, whether it's with this ritual thing, whether it's with your car breaking down at 2 a.m. or whatever the case may be. I'm here to help. So I really think that that's a message I know I need to take to heart more and be able to be prepared to help in all those kind of situations. All right, so let's see here. What is the best meal that's served at your lodge on a regular basis, like in stadium meetings and such? Michael, to answer your question, about 6 months ago or so, the man who did most of our cooking took a voluntary hiatus away from Freemasonry. He's a very busy individual. He's got a very prominent position in our community, and he's also got a teenage daughter. And he said, "Look, guys, I want to take a year off. I want to spend time with my girl before she gets too much bigger, and she doesn't care how about daddy anymore. She only cares about friends. So I'm going to go do that." And he was our lodge cook for several years before that. And our lodge was known that you show up to Longstreet Lodge, you get fed, and you get fed good. And we enjoyed having that reputation. So I'll share one meal that he made on a regular basis that everybody wouldn't stop talking about. But since then, we've had several other brethren, including myself. We just started taking it month by month, and many brethren have come up with some good meals. In fact, one brother served something just last month that I tried to replicate, and I did a terrible job with it at home. Good chefs. So the one thing he cooked was a shepherd's pie. And if you have never had shepherd's pie, then shame on you. And if you ever have had shepherd's pie, you haven't had the best shepherd's pie you could possibly have until you come to Longstreet Lodge and eat his, because it is stinking good. All right. Can I clarify William Preston's role in Freemasonry? Not in the time left. William Preston wrote a book that was basically like a monitoring guide. You could go as far as to say it was an expose. And his work, which was sort of coupled off of other people's work, has now predominantly pervaded in Freemasonry as being the ritual that we have today. Suffice to say, folks, I'm gonna summarize William Preston's role in Freemasonry in maybe a sentence or two. Whatever, if you're in the United States, whatever ritual you're doing now, if you're not in the state of Pennsylvania, is not the ritual that was first done inside of your state. It just wasn't. I'm that confident in saying it. Something was drastically different. And I don't mean little tiny one word changes. I mean, something was drastically different in your ritual. But William Preston wrote something that a lot of Grand Lodges sort of circled around and adopted in various ways. And so he has greatly affected what our ritual in the United States today looks like. And it is not what Freemasonry started up as, even in 1717. So there you are. Uh, Jaunty says from the United Kingdom, he's geeky about Exodus symbolism. Oh, I think I'm already over my head. Does the Ark of the Covenant have a bearing in ancillary degrees beyond the blue craft? Which degree would you recommend first? So yes, you will see the Ark of the Covenant both in the York Rite and in the Scottish Rite. Which one would I recommend first? I don't think that one is better to have first than the other. So I don't think that that's too important. Usually with local brethren, I'll tell them two possible pieces of advice. If you fully intend on taking both, if that's your ultimate goal is, hey, look, I'm going to do both, but which one do you think I should do first? Well, in that case, I think you should do the one that's coming next. So if you have a Scottish Rite reunion in a month, take it. If you have a York Rite festival in a month, take it, and roll with the punches from there. If you want to see blue craft masonry almost exactly the way you've already been receiving it and see how the story continues, if you want to see it in that format, then go with the York Rite. If you want to see a more broader approach to how to interpret the same lessons and how we can learn things from other different creeds from around the world and how those also have an influence in Masonry, then I would suggest the Scottish Rite. But I do not hold one above the other. So there you are. And since this is usually the follow-up question, I'll just address this real quickly. It doesn't matter whether you're Christian or Muslim or whatever you are. I would take either one. So take it with that. There are some conditions that come into place when you get to uh, the Knight Templar orders in the York Rite, but you can talk to somebody locally about what all that is about. I mentioned it in my video before. So there you are. Take it for what you want. I've got a whole other video about the York Rite versus the Scottish Rite. I would encourage you to go onto youtube.com/whatisammason, and there'll be a little search icon there, and just type in York Rite and you'll find it there. It's very clear that it's comparing York Rite and Scottish Rite. They follow the exact same storyline with somewhat different points of view. So take it or leave it there. And for the fact that you're in the United Kingdom, everything I just said might be completely worthless. I have no idea how the York Rite and Scottish Rite are administered in the United Kingdom. I'm sure it's not the same as it is here. All right. Somebody's asking about how to join the fraternity from Kenya or Nairobi. What you should do, you should go to the United Grand Lodge of England's website, and up in the menus, they have a section there for districts. And if you click on districts, you can go to Africa, and then you can start looking for whichever of those districts would be where your country is. It may well be, I think there's an East African district. You can click on that. It goes to a website, and they have all the contact information there. So that's how you find a grand or a lodge in Africa. And no, Joseph, I have never met a Rastafarian Freemason. That that might be interesting. All right. Do you still have to be asked to join, or can you find a local lodge and check it out and put in an application to join? James, it does somewhat vary depending on your jurisdiction, but the global answer here is to say you do not have to be asked to join. You have to ask to join. And that, I think, is one of the major disconnects that we have with the general public. I think that there really is a group of men out there who want to join Freemasonry, but think that it's something they have to be personally invited into. And I've even heard people say that they had the understanding that if they asked, it was some sort of an immediate banning and they would never be allowed to join Freemasonry. Folks, I'd like to just sort of clue you in on something here. I don't know what the lodge down the street is doing next week, let alone what person they did not admit into a lodge. Okay, so there's really no way. If you, let's say it were that situation where I had to ask you, and if you asked me, you'd be banned forever. There is no mechanism out there for me to notify every single lodge that that Mr. James asked, and therefore can never be a Freemason. Just think of that logically. There's no way for something like that to happen. You have to go to somebody and ask, and that's that. Okay, folks, we've reached our time limit. I'm very sorry that Brother Joseph Wages couldn't be with us here tonight. I hope that we can reschedule this for a later time. And please have him in your thoughts and make sure that he and his family are well, because that's my biggest concern. He's always corresponded with me pretty easily. So, folks, not what we were expecting, but I hope that you enjoyed it anyway, and we'll try to get back with you again next week. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.